Sampling contexts son diálogos interactivos que promueven una reflexión en torno a qué es y cómo se hace hoy arquitectura. Sampling contexts va más allá del formato conferencia para desvelar procesos de trabajo, de gestión y de comunicación desde lógicas contemporáneas como catalogación, remix o ensamblaje. Sampling contexts son estudios emergentes europeos que van a revelar cómo producen y reproducen sus arquitecturas. Un escenario valioso que no es accesible a pesar de vivir en un mundo de sobresaturación de imágenes. Sampling Contexts es el prototipo de Argument, un ciclo anual de investigación y publicación del Departamento de Proyectos Arquitectónicos con el que construir una posición en torno a un tema de interés disciplinar. Bienvenidos a este momento irrepetible. Welcome to Sampling Contexts.
Well, hello, welcome everybody. I'm going to do the presentation in English. It's just for the person we have invited. Thank you everybody for being here, and welcome to the first event of our spring semester conference program, which is titled Argument, as you might already know. I want to thank him on behalf of the Architectural Design Department. I'd like to thank Mr. Vylder for having accepted our invitation and being our guest today, explaining us the work of the office, one of the most intriguing and also inspiring of the current architectural panorama. And well, as you may all know, Sampling Context, which is the title of this year program, tries to explore to different formats of the conference, trying to transform it more into a dialogue, and trying to pull out some of the references and also the procedures that stand behind the practices they have decided to explore. So I leave you with a curatorial team which will lead the conversation, and I will also take this opportunity to thank them and congratulate them for the great work they are doing. And now join me and welcome Mr. Vylder.
Thank you, Silvia. Welcome everybody to this, as Silvia was saying, first event of this second semester of Sampling Context. We're having today Jan de Vylder from the Vylder Vintalier, and I want to take this opportunity to announce next Wednesday would be the second event this semester, which is going to be the format of two offices invited. It's going to be Luis Urculo and Guillermo Santomá. Next Wednesday, 28th, at 7. It's going to be in the evening. And the third one and the last one of the cycle is going to be Bruder, who is going to be here on the 11th of April, also in the evening at 7. So we're going to enjoy today this lecture, and we hope to see you in the next ones.
So we start immediately right now, and we have together with us Jan de Vylder from the Belgium office, flying directly from Ghent, from the office de Vylder Vintalier. So please join me in welcoming Jan de Vylder.
Thank you very much for inviting me into this lecture, and I'm happy to share with you only 3 works. It was it. There is music playing, but I will do double. Anyway, I'm happy to present you some work. Inga and you are not with us, but of course they are at the same time here with you, showing the work. Let's start with it. What you see here is a kind of presentation drawing for a competition that we won and that has been realized in the meantime. And when you look at it, you see in the middle a building with a kind of white portico, a loggia. And also to the left and the right, you see like white emphasized loggias. Keep that picture in mind. This is a competition for the psychiatric clinic in Melle, which is around Ghent. And the competition had two elements. First of all, I will tell you a little bit about the site. This is an old representation. It is a psychiatric clinic which has been founded or realized, let's say, in the beginning of the 19th century, before all the psychiatry was in the city and the conditions were, of course, of no quality. And then they invented this scheme of having a park layout with separate buildings, kind of pavilionesque, villa-like buildings, and every different psychiatric disease was treated in one of the buildings. It was at that time quite revolutionary. It was an open park, so it was not anymore like it used to be an imprisoned hospital. The beautiness itself, it was really, I never was there at that time, but it must have been great. But then happens, of course, that time goes by and visions or ideas on psychiatry also move on. And then you had that in the meantime, in the time going on, buildings were disappearing and replaced by typically hospital buildings throughout the years. You can see that on the right above, well, I go back, you had these beautiful villas with patios inside and so on. But then you see here on the left side this new type of buildings which do replace the old one. The old ones were demolished and were replaced. At the end, it delivers a status like you can see here on the model. To the left side, all the old villas disappeared. Also in front, on the right side, some disappeared. And when I look with you to the model, then the building I was showing off was this type of building. What happened is next, there was a young director, my age, who arrived like a couple of years ago. And the moment he arrived, he was confronted with the demolishing of this villa and the start of the demolishing of that villa. And of course, it's true, those villas, they were not anymore accordingly nowadays conditions for human treatment. They were outdated. They couldn't follow anymore the new rules and so on. So they were of no need, and that's why they started to demolish them, to or replace them or just demolish them. And he said, like, we can't do this. We should stop this immediately, because it's true, we can't do anything with it, but on the other hand, we are losing in high speed an interesting, let's say, architectural setting. And he launched a new competition. And in that new competition, he asked two things. First of all, to give an idea on how, even although those new buildings, what was previously very prominent, that the architecture was all of the same type, and by these new buildings disappeared. And he asked if you could launch an idea on how to reconnect all the buildings architecturally wise, even though of different architectural expressions. And on the other hand, this building here was demolished already. He stopped the building site, or let's say the demolishing site of that villa, and he kept it standing like that. And the second part of the competition was, what can we do with that building, though there is no program? On the first part, we proposed this. You remember that painting, that drawing from the beginning? We made a catalog of all kind of buildings. This is the main building we had to refurbish. We started to make a catalog of all buildings and to look, to observe them in a specific way. We started to catalog them and looked to all the additions that had been done to those buildings throughout the years, or even with the new buildings, which were entirely new from the 70s, the 80s, and the 90s. We started to try to look at them in a way that we could discover a new chain of like loggias, and we presented as first answer in the competition this proposal, that we just simply would make them free. If you can see, left above, for example, there is a kind of extension to a beautiful old building. We could make them free, and we could make new types of loggias all over the terrain, so that people, as they used to do, walking through the park, could walk from one loggia to the other. That was the first answer we gave to the context of the competition. Second answer, you see the pavilion again on the painting in the middle. As I said, they started already the demolition, but in a very early stage. They took away the roof tiles, but not the roof structure, for example. Our proposal was to stay with that, to not change the condition of the building site, but to just make it a little better. And you see here the first outcome being the outcome of the first loggia. So we opened the greenhouse or the veranda, which was added in the 60s, and we made a simple loggia of it. But as you also can see, the roof tiles were gone and they stayed gone. We come closer to it and you discover a first addition. We made a program we made a building without a program, but also a building which was or is constantly open. The building, hopefully, or it shows like it's used today, starts to become a kind of structure which is in between an open place and still a building, still a house. So we added few things, and we added 7 greenhouses into the building, spread over the levels, spread out in the building. Like you can see, we go closer to the loggia. We took away the totally pavement, or let's say the flooring of the house, of the villa, and we replaced it with this kind of mineral structure, so that when it rains and the rain comes through the building, it just evaporates or evacuates into the ground. We come close to the right side, and for example, here you can see that due to the demolition action, they opened already a part of the wall to get in with a bulldozer, but we restored it. And we restored it in this way. This is part also of the way we wanted to work with the building. First of all, we cleaned out the building. Let's say we took away all the mineral elements like plasterwork, ceilings, so that of course the building could not start rotten. When it rains through it, the wooden floors should be able to breathe. You will see it any minute. On the other hand, we had to restore some parts as they were in a bad status, like this one, which was deliberately made like this to let open for the bulldozer, as I said. But we wanted to restore it as a trace. Not restoring it perfectly, but restoring it in a way that one could feel what happened and what one could see how it was healed. And now I use a word which was not exactly the word we used when we presented the project, but which was a word that was given by the psychiatrist to the building, saying, well, the beautiness of what you've done with our building today is that you changed it, but that you made clear which were the traces of the damage. And they called it the healing of the building. So here we walk into the project. I would say this is maybe a much more interesting photograph to start with. And when you walk into the building, you see on this photograph what happens exactly. All the plasterwork is gone. You see the wooden floors, let's say the structure of the floors. The metal beams we did not add, but were initially in the building. And above you can see through the ceiling, through the sky, through the roof, and the rain and the snow, it all comes down. You see also a lamp, which is the normal lamp post you found around the park. We just introduced it to create the idea that the park is running through the building right now, or that the building is really part of the park as such. Talking about those restorations, talking about the way we worked, is that on one hand, we said to the client in the commission or in the competition, we said that we wanted to keep it like this to check out with them whether space could lead to certain treatments without ambition, let's say. That means that we offer them new spaces in which they might meet each other in different circumstances. For example, the psychiatric clinic also inhabit youngsters. On Sunday now they have a place to gather around a fireplace with their parents and to just talk. But also on Sunday afternoon, people from around who are biking on a Sunday afternoon stop over there to make a small stop to have a small picnic or whatever together. Or the board of the institute make their board meetings into this building at certain moments. Secondly, what we also proposed was that, of course, we understood that we were making, at first eye, something strange. We wanted to keep the building, which was felt like a ruin, but then we don't want to express it as a ruin. We wanted to check it out with them, how we could change it, like restoring those traces, or like to work with them, and that's what we do right now, to work with them a couple of years in changing the building. Because of course, if you present a building with an open program, as we did to them, you also should learn, you also should experience out of the use of that building. And for example, this greenhouse we're gonna demount and put it at another position in the building as they started to understand the use of the building. So what we finally did was to deliver them an open competition proposal, by which we are still today involved now. You could say that makes your practice more difficult, but I like it to go back and to debate the things, how we should change. Also, of course, we do a yearly checkup of the condition of the building, which floors we could take away or we should restore slightly, like we did, for example, with the brickwork. So what you see here is, again, an overview from below to above. We are in the middle of the building. You have a wall that crosses the middle of the building totally. And on the right side, you see a kind of small theater, which is in fact the result of taking away the floor between basement and ground floor. And by doing that, we could create a small theater where they today exercise with their patients, with their groups, small things. Or for example, there is also a hospital school connected to this psychiatric clinic, and often the students there come to have lessons over there, of course, when the weather is good. We planted a tree inside to continue the park into the building. This is another view on it. And for example, we also opened all the windows on the ground floor so that you easily could walk through the building without just looking for a door. You always can enter. And small details of importance for me are like, for example, here, the windowsills we took away, the wooden ones, we restored with concrete. And at a certain moment at the building site, we arrived, and it was a beautiful day with blue sky and white clouds, and we decided to paint all this concrete, which was, let's say, roughly poured into white, referring to the clouds. This is also very important to us. I can tell you, like taking away this floor was not a competition proposal, but came throughout the building site, finding out that the condition of that floor was not too good at all. So we had to take it away, and then we changed the proposal into this auditorium. It's of the same action like the white cloud painted concrete restorations. Or for example, the brickworks that I showed, we did not make really a detail, but we gave rules to the contractor on how he should work. And so the next week, visiting the building site, we found out ourselves what it delivered. So we look a little bit around, move on. We're gonna walk a little bit down into the small auditorium. We look to the other side of the building, and now we turn back. And as I sit, for example, in the old chimneys of the old heating system of the building, we made a fireplace And every evening, actually, the youngsters are gathering around to sit and share their feelings or what happened that day. So finally, this became also for the psychiatric clinic, thanks to the director, and I should not forget to mention someone else, which is Gideon Bois from the office BAVO, who was from in the beginning together with the director, or let's say he was the right hand of the director in formulating or reformulating new ideas on the site. But what delivers it today is that though of course they plan to new buildings accordingly, new standards in psychiatry, they also found out not only a way to go along with their heritage, but also to open the debate on how space also could be the first point to start from to work in psychiatry. So they start from the physical given. It's not said that they will treat all buildings like this, hopefully not, because then it would become not only a gimmick but a little bit cynically. But on the other hand, it is amazing to see how now therapists, psychiatrists come down with their patients and try to reformulate in this building the way of approaching each other in a different way. Here you see another detail of the white clouds and of the restoration of a vertical incision that was made to get up and down electricity wiring and how we restored this. And finally, it delivers this kind of moments, which are, of course, nicely framed in the pictures that Philippe Dujardin made on this occasion, but on the other hand, do also explain exactly what we were, let's say, only doing with the building on one hand, but on the other hand, ambitioning with that building. Restore, heal, keep for a while, and from there out, reopen new debates on possible programs, possible use of buildings. As I said, only 3 projects was the questions, but I added like shadow projects. First shadow project on this one is a project we are working on right now. Well, this slide is not in the right position, doesn't matter. It's a project in the city of Charleroi, which is the French-speaking part of Belgium. And I like to talk a little bit about this picture. Charleroi was in the 60s, 50s, 60s, 70s beginning, one of the main heavy industrial cities in Belgium. Heavy metal cities, it was not a mining city, but a heavy metal industry. And you can see that the landscape around Charleroi changed significantly because these are the terrals, which are in fact residues of the metal industry. So it's not natural, it is created, culturally created you could say, but let's say industrial created. And this photograph is taken from the above city. It's not that it's so different, but there is a significant difference. Looking outwards the city, and as this heavy industry was very important, not only in Charleroi, but in Belgium, in the 60s they planned to build themselves what they called Palais des Expos, so an exposition hall, tall 60,000 square meter. And what you see here on the left side and on the right side is this exhibition spaces. You have to imagine they are 3 stories high, of each 9 meters, so 2 of them you can't see because they are on the slope of the city, and from the other side you can see them. This picture is a picture from the building site moment, in which the halls were nearly finished, and the mid-zone was the so-called lobby building, in which people were received and to get then up and down to be distributed in the buildings. And you can see that the lobby building in the middle is not yet finished, and that's of course since the fact that there was a little bit more architectural around, material details finishing at all. Cynically, when the building was finished, the whole metal industry, not only in Belgium but in Europe, went bankrupt end 60s, beginning 70s. And when the building was delivered, though they measured 60,000 square meters needed to show off their production, it was never used anymore. Few times, but mostly it was empty. Now, like 40 years later, they got from Europe a subsidy to invest, a lot of subsidies to invest in this wasteland almost. And one of the subsidies was to restore this building. It's 60,000 square meters, and there was 30 million euros available to restore the building, which I can tell you is about 1/3 of the money you should need to really restore the whole building. There was a competition, we candidated, and the topic of the competition was, they understood that it was a lot of money, at the same time lack of money. So the competition brief described that they were expecting that the most of the interest would go to the central building and to give it an architectural upgrade. You know, new facades, new style, and so on. We proposed the opposite. This is a model we made. Now you see it from the other side. You see the 3 levels. You see the city a little bit higher. And we proposed to return back to this building site photo, and we proposed the opposite way. We said, instead of investing in the middle part, why should we not strip the middle part and make it more open and introduce a new kind of urban, really urban city park. A new urban city park that opens again the uptown city to the downtown city, and that delivers the beautiful concrete structure, which is as a kind of new stacked experience for an urban park. Open all day, people can walk through it. It avoided the costs of the investments to make it sustainable, to make it architectural more interesting. And by that we could save money to invest in the main halls. So we decided to upgrade, let's say, the right part of the model. This, here in this case, the left part. And to leave the right part as a given residue. Because again, they don't need a 60,000 square meter building to fulfill any program in the future. And if they would need it for one time, well, then maybe they had to recondition a little bit temporarily for a couple of weeks the right wing building, but the left wing building would have all technical equipment, good insulation, and whatever. So we were somehow, honestly, surprised to learn that we won that competition. And today, or one of those days, the tendering for the construction site will be opened, and we will be looking forward for the moment 2022 to see the result of what we invented here. Second project, a totally other scale. It's about this small pavilion. And the slide, which was wrongly at the wrong point, should have stood here. This pavilion is called "That It Does Not Look Good Makes That It Looks Good." Maybe I have to first, this is an in-between stage when we were making it. Another one. Okay, I quickly go first to this. There are again 2 projects, and I should have switched them the way. Anyway, what you see here. This is the castle called Horst Castle, near to Leuven. Leuven near to Brussels, Vlaams-Brabant. And every year in September there's a music festival of, I would not say techno music, but about maybe a little bit more hardcore. And this music festival, which is small scaled, is always happening in the castle, which you see in this photograph. And this castle is with water around, and it has a beautiful inside courtyard. But this year, they had to close down the castle because of risk of building pieces that could fall apart. It needs urgently restoration, but no money is ahead. So they lost this nice circumstance of that courtyard, and they asked us to design or to think about a new way to have a podium for the music festival. And of course, I can tell you no money was around. So what we did is we talked with a supplier of bricks. And what you see is what you see. It is just the stacking of these packages of bricks we all see arriving at building sites. And we stacked them like this height. And we made like two L-shaped walls that came together to define a courtyard. It was fastly made, it was easily made. Later, after it was dismantled, and the bricks went back to the supplier, and probably they are by now used already in one or other villa or house or apartment building. But the point was that the question we believed was fulfilled. A courtyard, no more, no less. As they were enthusiastic, those young guys who organized this, together with Gijs van Varenberg, a young office, they pointed us out that they were also working on another plan. And the plan was, together with the Agency for Nature and Environment, to work in the huge park, but not only there, in the landscape around Leuven, to invent some pavilions that could become marking points when people were on Sunday biking, walking around, walking from one pavilion to the other. And they have quite a list of architects they will invite from now on. But due to the nice way of working together, they invited us at the same time to think about a new pavilion on that side of the park, to replace an old wooden one which was about to collapse. Again, no money around and so on. But of course, at that moment you are in a certain status of mind. We were working with those brick walls, and then we were invited in the pavilion, and there was something like looking to those walls or looking to the idea of the walls, because it was not executed at that time. We were interested in the way how those bricks are stacked. And then we did like this. Simply, we demolished or we deconstructed the old pavilion, used the wooden planks to make a kind of socle, but the socle is not straight. Then we just stacked all the bricks like they were normally stacked in this kind of packages till a certain height. We decided to just pour concrete in it. We made formwork around it. Later we uncasted the formwork, and this is what happened. Above, we added one roof, which is far too thin and which starts slightly to lean today, so that helps us water evacuate. But on the other hand, for us, this was a moment, I would not say that we were annoyed towards the normal making of details in architecture, I would not say that, but on the other hand, it was quite opposite to a certain concern in details we are so interested in our work. And we did this, and we discovered ideas like, well, maybe it are not details, it are just things that happens. Maybe it's ugly, that it does not look good, but at the end, altogether, it looks good. It just makes a totally other approach, at least for us, in how things could come together and start to mean something in a different way. So the whole thing was casted with the material on site. We stole some of those packages that never returned. We stapled them and we made a pavilion. And with the contractor who was there, anytime he wanted to control the details and asked us to come and view if the things were nicely made, we refused and said, just go on. And if he had to uncast the formwork of the plate, he could do it just taking it roughly out, and if concrete was damaged, we did not care. And before we poured the concrete in the rooftops slides, we just added some sand and some grind so that the concrete would be damaged at the end. And it was a kind of, in short, in a couple of weeks experiment that delivered this pavilion. This was a test out. That delivered this pavilion, and now it's there. And I like the idea, or both ideas, saying that it does not look good, makes that it looks good. On one hand, and on the other hand, the idea that I say today, and I still don't know what I have to do with it. I mean, in architectural thinking, in future projects, and so on. But it's an experiment that stays with us, and that is maybe a kind of consequence of what we did in the psychiatric clinic, and might lead to something, but let's not speculate on that today. So now I walk over with you again where it all started. Nice thing about such project like the psychiatric clinic or this project, that you are like in a short time frame in which you have to act, in which does not allow you to reflect too long and too deeply on things, but at the same time discover that by that you might discover deep moments in thinking about how things can be made, in how space can be defined, and in how life or how occupation can take part of it. Third project, we are exactly 15 minutes. This is, if you might ask, what is Flanders? This is a typically Flemish situation. So I will show you now a project which is about elderly housing in the middle of a huge, I would not say city block, but a kind of village area. And this is the entrance to it because the client, the developer, bought all pieces of plots but was not able to buy the left and the right plot. So he needed to be he was confronted with the fact that the entrance of his project is like bordered by that contextual situation, which a lot of people dislike, but I have to say I really like the kind of contrasts which is around. Anyway, this is the ground plan, or let's say the contextual plan, and this is a drawing of the first phase because actually we are working now on the extension this way out. This one won't sell this piece, but those are now part of the next phase. And this is the ground plan of the elderly housing, and maybe the main thing is that this is for us about, though people will live in a room only, how can we make this room gently? And what you see here is that one has wings, practically, central line, transversal rings, rooms are organized in units. So all what goes along with this like functional organization is still there, but the only main difference, or one of the main difference, is that we just shifted out each time the room and the corridor and the facade. So those are drawings we make at a certain moment, not only to convince clients, but also to control the ways we want to work. And the main ideas, as you can see, is that by that the corridor is just not a long endpoint, but each room like presents itself in the corridor by its corner, and the opposite way, each room presents itself in the facade, not only with a window looking straight out, but with a corner window and possibly a small little terrace or loggia. Studies on the rooms, drawings, model studies from that room. And this is where it's about. This is exactly representing what I came to say. How a simple room where people stay in better conditions when it is still a service apartment, but when they really get really old, it becomes more a kind like, I would not say hospital room, but we all know this. And how then this might be related not only straight to the context outside, but also the context of the other rooms, the context of the other inhabitants around. And all it's maybe just about this small shift and about this corner position of the window looking to the outside. Model once again. This is the corridor. So each time you see the door and the side door as a kind of small storage room, or you look the opposite way, the other way around, or this is the way how those wings now kind of wave out to each other and are not just typically straight wings. And of course this picture also delivers another point. It's about, I would say, not only the fact how you are connected in your own context, but also how you find a certain intimacy. And we believe the roof in this case plays a very important role. The roof is like too big, too wide, but by that it's, we believe, connecting even outdoor space to the indoor space, or let's say give the feeling that the outside is not only the outside, but it has a kind of canopy which makes it gently together with the sunsheds, with the brise soleils. So, opposite to the other two projects, which are maybe also opposite towards each other, the psychiatric clinic has a very conscious mind, while the pavilion is just a totally unconscious mind. We believe, though, also in this product, in this production, we are aware about the same things, about how, with small details, with kind of small differences, one can a little bit redefine conditions. Again, photos of Philippe Dujardin, which is almost, let's say, a partner of our office, in the sense that, of course, he is, let's say, the main first critic of the work we make, the way he frames the photographs, the way he eventually understands that those windows, which of course he does, but those windows are the main topic, and then you get those photographs of him who do confirm that what we are looking for by the first critical viewer, being Philip, is also captured like this. And then on plus, of course, the way he also understands how details and how light works on the building. For example, how he is able, here are small mirrors in between, and how he is able to caption that kind of idea throughout the architecture. And this is about domestic feeling. This is about life. This is about maybe how people used to live throughout their life, and how we can bring it in a simple way back. The last project, the shadow project of this main project, talking about Flanders, I think it's good to introduce. What you see here is Flanders pur sang, fundamental. Flanders has a history or an economy of individual housing, mostly also built by individual clients. And generally it's always a main house. This is a series of houses from the 50s in a humble status built. And the main house has then one level mostly, with the bedrooms above and a gentle living room and dining room below. And then mostly, as you can see left and right, an addition of smaller spaces, being kitchen or next to the kitchen room, sometimes a bathroom, sometimes a small space which is connected to the garden, but always a kind of change of connections. And so this young couple bought this house and came to us and asked us somehow to avoid this Flemishness. On the other hand, we don't think we did that much different than how it usually goes. Okay, if you look to it, it might look new, and if you come closer, you might start to discover other details. Like, for example, the rooms are not nicely one after the other, but they are slightly shifted, by which every room has a kind of straight connection to the garden, and even in between there is a small patio between the main house and this back house. You will see it any minute in other photographs. But then if you come closer, you might see differences. You might see the detail of the window, which is not nicely in the middle of the brickwork, but brought to the corner, and the lintel above, which is not a concrete or mantle, but a wooden lintel, and so on. Let's go inside. This is the inside celebration of the daily life. It is, I can say it like this, a mixed construction on concrete, steel, wood, and so on. And it has a couple of details which were programmed in the development of the house, at the same time came over to us the moment we were on the building sites. And for example, this beautiful concrete, which we needed by the engineer, we declared to stay as such. Or for example, this wooden beam, which is a structural element, we declared to stay like that. I like to show this because to me what is important, this is, you see the kitchen at the back of the photograph connecting towards the main house, and you are here in, let's say, the last room connected to the garden. Maybe the photograph will drop in, but anyway, at the back of this photograph there is the garden. And to us here, what you can see and what happens is like one day when you are in the morning drinking your coffee, you want to understand how this all works, but probably as being not an architecture you will not understand. And the next day you drop that idea of wanting to understand what you see, and you just enjoy the space only, and looking to the garden through the window, seeing how this wooden column supports the concrete structure above, and just enjoy the lightness or the light that comes along. This is a picture when you have this morning coffee and you look around and have light from everywhere, but also have enjoyable, I believe, qualities of materials and details. We walk back now through the main house, passing by the kitchen, arriving in the main house, which we connected, of course, to a patio, as you can see here in the middle, and to another patio on the left side, which brings a strange kind of evening light inside. And then you can read the previous ground plan of the house, because we made not only that green beam at the back, but the other beam is just supporting a wall which is above, but it's also in fact the replacement of a wall which was at this level visible. And mainly you could place all those metal constructions nicely away after white plastered ceilings and walls, but we like to express the interventions we made at that point. And then of course you can debate many things. For example, why this red brickwork was so eminent in the project, but maybe it was related to the first moment we ever entered the house, seeing this kind of decorative brickwork, that it came consciously, unconsciously a part of the whole series of decisions that came along with the house. 3 projects,
Thank you.
3 shadows, and that's...
Thank you, Jan, much for this first part of this lecture series. No os mováis porque en un minuto comenzamos la segunda parte. In a second, or two, Juan? Oh, here.
I hope I don't forget.
Okay, we continue. Can you hear me? No? Barely? All right. So we continue with the second part, in which we drop you a few questions, and you have your 20 images, and you can choose.
Okay. I just want to
yeah.
few credits to the music which I selected. Maybe we can play it after really loud, because we should play it really loud that it hurts. Because I've chosen that music which is from a Belgian composer, Chris de Voort. And the piece that I choose especially is because you don't know what it is at the end. It starts very gently, but it brings everything together. So if we have time later on, I would like to play it really loud. It's 7 minutes, but you have to stay. You have to try to stand it. At the end, I believe, to me, when I listen to this music, and maybe my explanation was not that clear enough, this music, everything together might explain things. So, okay.
Yeah, sure. It sounds really challenging. We will do it. Fun. Great. Okay, so we'll continue with the second part. And the first question is a common question in our lecture series, which is basically how you organize your office. You are 3 partners, 3 heads. So basically, how do you manage the process design inside your office? Do you all work together in every project, or you divide the type of projects or the typology of them, or you just like discuss every single step that you produce inside?
Well, it's of course like this. It has been founded by Inge Jo and myself. It's 2010 when we all came together. It's not such a long time ago. In fact, we are a little bit surprised what overcomes us. And let's say, like, for example, being asked here to give lecture, and this is an ongoing thing. I do believe that the idea of the office is that we work as 3 together. Officially, you are principals of an office, of course, but we try not to act like principals. So we are still working on our projects from A to Z. That means that there is an involvement of us in any stage of the project, from designing till also being on the building sites together with contractors and clients debating things. I think what I showed is not possible to make it in a clear phasing of this is the design, this is the detail, this needs to be made, and that will be the result. Of course you project it, but then every time we make all our details, we say, cool, we have them now, and now at the end we know what we change throughout the project. So this is, I think, still believe today a very demanding energy on everyone in the office, also from the collaborators, but also from us. Of course, we grow. Those moments of really sticking together get under stress, under tension. On the other hand, you have a good understanding from each other. I don't think that there are differences in that sense, but still we do efforts to all work together on things as extensively as such. I do believe that, I have to admit, that the projects we make together are demanding a lot of energy. We also said that it's interesting to spoil energy on projects, because if you spoil it, or if you allow yourself to spoil time, you often find other dimensions or other possibilities. So the economy is in that sense not very profitable still. Don't believe that. But the pleasure by it is quite Bitcoin, let's say, equivalent to real money. So it is a tension constantly, the way we work together. But I do think that it has to do with a very intense way of working with everyone, also the team. I mean, we are very thankful to all those people around us who try to follow us and make it come true mostly. That's the way how this office at this moment works. It's not an example in business plan, but it's an example in pure pleasure, I believe. And on the same time, I hope still, that although we progress and we get older and we are within a couple of years, 10 years there, that we are not arriving at a point that we get a recognizable status, that still things, I think what I showed with the pavilion and so on, has to do with trying to redefine things of which we even are not sure, for example.
Okay, it sounds, I think, very familiar for us.
So,
Yes.
Okay, so
I think, yeah. Being teaching in Switzerland, with all respect, this story, they look to me and they think like, what the hell are you trying to say? But I do think that your life is quite equivalent to that, yeah.
Okay. We were saying before, but Jan has been teaching in the Netherlands, in Belgium, and also in Switzerland. Actually, he's flying back today to ETSAM because he's teaching tomorrow. So this is like his personal scenario in Europe. Our second question is about the Flemish context, which is for us quite intriguing. It seems very interesting. So recently, we have seen how a few Flemish architectural offices have a sort of new style, coming from, I could say, even recognizable, which characteristics are like this beauty, unfinished interiors, a creative craftsmanship, the use of apparently cheap materials in a rich way. The result is an amazing personal and attractive architecture, even though an oddity for us. And that's why maybe we also choose your office here. Therefore, your sentence, architecture is not a matter of architecture. Actually, it seems that gathers these concerns. Could you please explain us how these Flemish contexts where you live have influence in your practice?
Okay, yeah. This Flemish context, which is felt particular today. I mean, a lot of people are descending to Flanders to look at it, to talk about it, to invite us to Madrid to talk about it, and so on. Maybe I try to pick up also some things which are in this 20 slideshow thing. Architecture is not a matter of architecture. It's a text we wrote in a recent ANU, and which is, first of all, I think, something personal, which is maybe now recognizable in the projects I showed. But at the same time, you could, let's say, share those ideas a little bit on Flanders also. I do think that, well, I have to say, if it comes about debating whether it's Flemish architecture right now, it depends in which bar and which moment of the night I find myself to defend the Flemish architecture or to rather be very critical with it. I have to say, I think there is a lot of to do today, and that means it's true that since the decades from the 80s, thanks to Vlaams Architectuur Institute, the Flemish Architecture Institute, and Vlaams Bouwmeester, a lot of things changed. There is a much broader field in architecture. But maybe in one bar, I would say, after a couple of drinks, I'm not so sure if we still hit this critical position that we were raised with, like people at Luc Deleu or Xavier de Geiter at that time. So it's, first of all, I want to say, we should take a longer time to debate the real value of the Flemish architecture, which I believe is still high value, but to try to diversify ideas on that. And I do think that architecture is not a matter of architecture as a sentence that we seems now to claim, which we do. On the other hand, also I do think, for example, in opposite to the Dutch scenery, which came a couple of decades ahead, the power of the Flemish architecture today is, especially in the very good offices, I believe, the total differences that are at the table at this moment. I do think that if you look to the work of 51 and 4A, or the work of Office Kersten Geers, David van Severen, and I'm pretentious enough to put our work, to place our work next to it, it's very diverse. One had never that kind of diversity in Holland at that time, by which it was, I think, from the beginning, where it is today, no step further. And I do believe that in Flanders there are, starting with Luc Deleu, I will not compare myself with him, for example, there are still these moments that there are new practices or new situations that come up which are related to the fact like we don't have to make architecture for architecture, we have to make architecture for finding a position. And I do think, for example, if I go back, sorry, now I did something with, okay, I know, no problem. When I go, for example, to another young practice, and sorry, I just compiled this in the morning here when we were debating or pre-debating this talk. I add a kind of 4 dias in which partly our own work, sorry, but it is related, it was a competition entry, a candidature we did together with a young office called Gijs van Varenberg, and in which you can see work of this office, which is, I would say, a little more related or at the edge of kind of, I would not say art, but in a very, they are at the edge of being a very, it's a pity, you can see it here, of being a very critical participant in all kind of debates, and I don't see the right pictures right here. I was a little bit too fast. Okay. Yeah, but I see that it's a scroll over. Sorry, it's a little bit too late, but check out the work from Gijs van Varenberg, for example. And those are youngsters that try to define new edges in how they can work with spaces and circumstances. So I think if it comes about Flanders, I'm really happy with all this kind of spots, which almost one cannot copy, which stays very important and personal, very autonomous in the whole scenery. And I do think that makes that Flanders probably will survive a little more the kind of vague architecture always goes, Swiss, Holland, the Anglo-Saxon vague, the Flemish vague, because it still is this very punctual ideas that go along with that. Maybe I can add one more slide, which I normally use in another context. It's a context when people ask what is architecture for you, which is a general question, but it happens that this general question is asked. But it's, and I will relate it to the idea of Flanders in any minute. But what is this? This is a picture of San Gotardo, when you don't take the tunnel and you just go over it. It's in August. And in fact, it doesn't mean anything. It's vacation. Everyone is around, cyclists, people stopping by, drinking something. But this one. Yep. This is the same position 1 year earlier. And all of a sudden you see a lot of things which have nothing to do with each other. The electricity pile, the traffic sign, the status with the horse, and the chapels in front, and the small staircase going up. But there is a condition which is different. So the humidity, the gray, makes that those objects which have nothing to do with each other, all of a sudden have something to do with each other. So I like talking with students. I like to often show these pictures to make understandable what we think we like to do, maybe also in the work as I showed, to bring things together in a complex that they all of a sudden mean something to each other, but they are different. And okay, coming back to Flanders, I do think that those are all different practices which have nothing to do with each other, but then due to the context of Flanders mean something to each other.
Yeah, this brings us to this idea of the sampling, which is the topic we choose for this lecture series. Since the beginning, your practice, the Vylder Vintalier, was came to our minds in order to include it in the series, and it was because we were really interested on the way you were sampling materialities, sampling times, also combining the new and the old, but also sampling styles and meanings. How do you understand this idea of sampling as a possible design strategy?
Well, the word strategy is, I think, something which strikes me, because it's not, I believe, a strategy. Maybe it has to do with this here. It is about trying to catch, merely for me, for us, to catch moments we are confronted with ahead, projects we made, or at the very moment. What you see here is a photograph. We have a collection of observations, and it's a fence, a metal, an iron cast fence, which has been broken. And someone has been restoring it. We don't know if it is a young ambition artist or a child, or someone who was bored with time and just wanted to do something. I do think that it's a picture which is related to how we like to look to the circumstances that are there. So if it's about sampling context, I mean, this is the mental idea of what context can deliver. It's not that this silver paper is initial, but it makes it different, and it makes that this context on one hand is still clear like it was, and on the other hand is changed to something else. I had another photograph of a building site where those hinges needed to be finished, and the contractor excused him that he still had to make this pommel. And we asked him not to do it, as we liked very much that incision for the preparation of the pommel, and there were enough of them. The door would not be, but we liked that moment very much to bring it to that point. Or this kind of observations in a staircase, where seemingly there was a problem with the door and the distance, and someone decided to really cut out. So what is it about context to me? About context, it is like more being interested in what comes to you than just really wanted to make a strategy out of it. Sometimes there is no context, and then you invent a context. For example, I don't know if I added this. No, I didn't add anything else. But for example, this drawing of Soluit, which is to me a key drawing in where it all started for us, which is a drawing of Soluit in an old gallery which left the house, and then it stayed like this, and a new landlord installed 23 student studio in the city palace, and the electrician came and installed the doorbells right in the art piece, probably not knowing what it is, but on the other hand guided by the art piece because it's nicely lined up with it. So to me, about sampling context is merely about observations which might be very occasional, which might be very particular at a certain moment, or like this one, I don't have the pictures here, I see, is how we then finally, in another context for a bus stop in Austria, where the context was nothing, out of an annoyment, we took our photos, those photos, we cut them out, folded them to a kind of small rooftop bus stop at that time. So context is not only about care with the context as such as it is there, but it's also how you recreate a context at a certain moment.
Great. We move on with another question on fragments. We see in the architecture you design, in the essays you write, and even in the way you publish your office monographs, the need to fragment. Your architecture is made by countless fragments, and even the essays sometimes are like poems full of content. Is this idea of fragment a way you think you design and you communicate the DVVT work on purpose, and this idea of autonomy that is a frequent concept we found through your essays?
We talk about the books now.
Either in this question or next question.
No, then I was just one moment.
Okay.
Can you repeat the question, because I was trying to find the picture
it's about
here.
this idea of a fragment, no? It seems like a fragment and autonomy, because you have it's not here, but they say about autonomy and fragment.
Okay. Maybe I put this slide on. This is a sentence of Francis Alice. It's a Belgian artist, raised as architect, working in Mexico City. And I do think that for us, once he said in another context those words, saying, sometimes doing something poetic can become political. And sometimes doing something political can become poetic. This is, to me, very much where it all is about. I do think that if I showed you the psychiatric clinic, now I'm going to use the word strategy. It's about designing or finding a strategy to get along on one hand with residues of buildings, on the other hand with programmatic orientations, yes or no. But finally, I do believe the building also has a lot of just poetic moments. That leads to the fact that those poetic moments, or the ways we go along with fragments of things, in an undebatable status become the fundament of wanting to be there, and by being there, changing lives in the way they occupy the space and the way they behave, and so on. I do think that those sentences is a double sentence which is very much important when we think about how we make projects, not as a purpose or not like a dogmatic starting point, but finally at the end, I hope, I believe all projects we made in that sense can be qualified a little bit under what you see in this sentence at a certain moment.
Yeah, I find it very interesting, no? Because we here, at least in this school, we used to relate poetic closer to romanticism, no, and politics with maybe other field. But suddenly you join together these two words here, and I find like very challenging, very interesting for us.
When we were talking before about the idea of the fragment, probably you could bring back this rooftop picture you were showing us before. It was really interesting on how to find beauty on the ordinary, on how these objects.
Yeah, this is to me very important. Maybe I just then go back to this Soluit series that I prepared for you. Is you see this? This is Milano, strangely. You bring it connected back. Or you see this as an old building where the electricity lining has been organized according what you see. So those are all the results of observations. And to me, observing things is one of the start points. You know, we have a frame of words, like you mentioned, analyze, is something I debate about with our students, and I never want to talk about with them. I said, we do not analyze, we observe things. Mm-hmm. Because in the observation is yet embedded your first imagination. How you can look to things, not how things just come to you, but how you can look to things. And this is, for example, just an ordinary snapshot out of a window in an apartment in Zurich, and you see on the other side a totally uninteresting building. Totally uninteresting. There are more uninteresting buildings in Zurich than they are interesting, I can tell you. And then, all of a sudden you frame. You observe, you bring things like this. And you see, I would not declare it as the most fantastic picture ever, but on the other hand, you see something to me like in the San Gotardo pictures we take, that things come in a different way together. They got another scale, they got another report to each other. Although they are just functional top-roof buildings, it is like they speak out now another reality. To me, these two pictures here are very key, and also when teaching and talking about how we could look to things. And I do believe that, like with the white cloud I explained, it's just a moment you see something and you bring it down into a project at that very moment.
You were saying that in the first part of the presentation, another sentence that really struck us, this idea of that does not look good makes it look good in the end. So this could also relate also the use of low-cost material, as you were saying before, with the bricks and the piles of bricks, but also with this idea of these structures that seem to be in a precarious equilibrium that we see in your work, and probably we see also in some of these references, such as the scaffolding or the window frame. This idea of something that is not completely stable but has a beauty on this approach to the situation.
Maybe give it a try with this as an answer. This is the Belgian pavilion. We were curating the pavilion 2016. And it is like this. Belgium, you have to understand, few words. The Belgian pavilion is run by the Flemish community and by the French community. They don't talk. So that means that everyone does his thing every other year, but they talk about one thing, and that is that when the season is closed in November, you're not going to paint the pavilion white for the next to come, because otherwise by March, spring, the next year it's dirty again due to the humidity in Venice. So when you come there, you find always a residue of the previous exhibitor. And in this case, this were those paintings which were related to an art presentation. And normally it should be painted white. And we proposed to not do it, and to paint it white, but not like it should be, but with a slightly difference. Namely, painting it white so that the old traces would be still visible. So we carefully painted this kind of purple-gray with some more white till the moment that it almost faded away, but still it was there. Also, damages from hanging pictures on the wall, we did not restore it, but we varnished them, so they got a totally other understanding. So why do I bring this picture now to the table? Because again, it's about this contextual thing, fragment, sampling, what is there, and starting from that point out to give it a slightly different possibility or interpretation. And on top with this, for example, we saved half money, because we only painted half of the total pavilion, but we could make this point. And okay, to just finalize this, we were curating the pavilion. We wanted to make the status that in times of scarcity, one can make still beautiful architecture, we believe. So the title of the exhibition was Bravoure, Scarcity, Beauty. So that even under scarcity one can create beauty. And we did not show that off with work of our own, but with a selection of 13 works of other architects, of which we said we would have made it, or we would have liked made it ourselves, and it precisely explains what we are looking for when it comes up to have. And then the only 14th intervention was this white painting, which probably no one had seen. There was a small mark with a text on it, and then you could understand how it came that the white was not perfectly white at that time.
Yeah, if I understand right, you said in the first part, like Philippe Dujardin it's a very important collaborator in the office, since he's always taking the pictures of the finished works. We are also interested in this series to talk with our guests about how every practice takes on the issue of communication. You have a very well-built webpage, which is pretty it's updated. You have an Instagram account that you are uploading pictures which are very well curated all the time, but also Álvaro mentioned before this idea of the monograph, that you have a plan for how you are going to bring your work to show it to the world. How important is for you, for the Vylder Atelier, to create this imaginary and to curate all the documents you present, such as drawings, models, photographs?
Well, I do think that part of our practice is, of course, making the things. That's the fundament of the practice. But one has to understand also that architecture is not only about making, it's also about progressing by debate, progressing by traveling, progressing by reading, all this kind of. So I do think that it's your task also as an architect to be part of that debate, not as a pretension or an ambition, but just with what you're doing, and no more, no less. So a couple of years ago, we were for the first time at the Venice Biennale in 2010, on invitation of Sana at that time. And we were young, 2010, when we founded the office, so we had no catalog or whatever, and we wanted to go fast. At the same time, even though we were young, of course, we made work before, I know. We were invited 2011 in a exhibition on our work in the Single Antwerp, which is very important. So we had to make a catalog, but we didn't want to make a catalog just to show off projects we made, but rather to show off ideas around projects, drawings, those kind of photographs like I showed from the observation of Soluit. We all put them together in a book, which was book one, the first one, which came out at the Venice Biennale, and which was a book with no text, so everyone was asking, yeah, wow, this book, can we have it, but can you tell something? So okay, 1 year later we had the solo exhibition, and then we continued, and we made, it was foreseen like that, 3 books, which book 1 and book 3 are together, just those images, just this archive of ideas, and the book 2 is only letters, only text. By that there came a kind of idea. We of course needed also a publisher, and it's this Mer Paperkunsthalle, which is an exclusive publisher of art books, and not only art books as representations of artwork, but books which are art pieces themselves, which are on demand, nice things. And this man was interested in our work. He never published architecture before, and he said to us, let's make the agreement that I will never publish an architectural review on you, but I will publish any book in this way you make. So we have now a total agenda. Oh, sorry, I have to go back and I have to use this one. Yep. And then, okay, we made that. This was quite a success, this book, honestly. It went twice in reprint. It might go in a third reprint, 2,500 copies each time. We were amazed that this went like this, and people paying crazy money for it at the internet. That's why we reprinted. But then, okay, other things came over, like this nice 2G. We got a chance. It's now, how long is it ago? 3-4 years ago. It was the first 2G which was not printed. Later on,
No.
This one?
Yeah.
Later on, you have to imagine a kind of blue here. We were invited by the Idibus International. It sold out again, and it's now again in reprint. And then later on, recently, we were invited to make an ANU monograph on our work. You see here 2 ANUs. It's not because there are 2, but it's because they made a small fault in the captions on the front page, in which Architecten DVVT, as you see it here, the name is spelled correct, but in the one you can buy at the shop, it's written Architecten de, and then the other line, DVVT, a small Japanese misunderstanding. So, but we were very happy with the monograph. We didn't want to take it out of order because of this fault, and we agreed with them that they would make a folding of 150 exclusive copies. But the fold you can turn over, and then you have two different fronts. Anyway, like this. Then happens next. Sitting with Mer Paperkunsthalle together again, and with Moritz Kung, which was, I'm really thankful, Moritz Kung helped us out in 2010-11 to get down in the single. We invented a new 1-book series of 3, which is called in this moment 3, book 7, 8, 9, which is connected to the first series. And we did something special, like this. First of all, there is no printed copy of the 2G, while there were some, which were not allowed to sell. So we sold the drawings we made from the 2G, and then you got one for free. But we don't have them right now. We made a bootleg of the 2G, which is a photo of the 2G, of each page in a book. We added some extra drawings and one extra project to avoid any debate on author rights. And now you have a new box of 3 books, being that the Idibus, which was sold out, so the first print, being that special ANU, and then we cut all the books at the same size. And they are in it. And by that, I liked very much that Mer Paperkunsthalle didn't want to do a monograph on us, but he wanted to do this compilage, this kind of reuse of our own books in another way. And Moritz Kuhn made a nice leaflet which goes in it. I will check. I have some pictures of the bootleg, the bootleg 2G. Quickly, there are snapshots, sorry, in which you can see the photo of the old book on the left side, additional photographs on the same project. So we were We know, of course, what it is about outer rights, but on the other hand, it's not about outer rights. It was like we wanted to make that book again, here brought together with 3, and then with this leaflet of Moritz Kuhn talking about what books for architects mean, making of the book. So finally, to resume all things, making books is not only a question of being proud of what you made and just show it off with an endless series of photographs as such, but it's also each time a way of reflecting on what we've done and how we could share ideas and so on further on. And now we're working on the third, but it will be named number 2 series, which is about exhibiting, but I can't tell not too much about it. It's still a small secret. And then we will have the 4th range, which we hopefully by next summer will be ready, which is just the same as the first book series. So yes, this book making is fundamental part of how we progress also in thinking. Like, for example, that bus stop I described, I have no photographs, sorry about. It's just a cut out of the photo out of a book of ourselves.
Well, thank you. Probably we can open for a few questions, the mic to the public. Somebody wants to ask something to Jan?
Yes, we have like a few minutes before we finish because we are perfect on time.
¿Alguien se anima? No?
Yeah.
This Silvia.
Well, I just want to point out, talking about references, I'm curious about the relation between your discourse and scarcity and also on doing less, just in order to get more. And this kind of argument, and the one developed by Lacaton et Basal, which I think for the Spanish audience would be the first architectural office to have developed this kind of thinking on architecture.
The question is, where are we different? That's in fact the questions. I do think we are related, and at the same time, it is different. I know Anne also now for time and understanding or trying to understand each other or listening to each other. I do think, coming back on the earlier word today, strategy is much more, which has to do with their work. On the other hand, I like to share also with Anne this sentence. I would like to share. I never showed her, but I could do it. But maybe at the end, I do think that not editors are fundamental ambition, but at the end, I believe that we are maybe a little bit more on the side of the word poetic, in the sense that it is not about wanting to be poetic, but I do personally believe that at the end, though all strategies and all politics, at the end, staying with something which is nice as such, which you love as such, where you just want to be around as such, is maybe a little bit more fundamental than just a strategy of things. But I don't say this to make differences as such, but I do think that I also recently, I was in a lecture of Anne. I was not surprised or amazed. I appreciated really their fundamental way of strategy with it. I don't think in our work we have that strategy or we have that ambition as such. I would say it more overcomes us than it is really the idea, than really the ideal, let's say it. But that's because of the type of question I get right now. I don't think it's needed or necessary to play us out towards each other. But it's from a different scale, it's from a different angle walking in, and maybe at the same time making both greenhouses.
Any other question? Okay, maybe we can probably
Thank you
close
very
the day.
much.
Thank you very much, Jan.
It's a pleasure.
Now we have time to play the music. So if somebody wants to leave because you're in a hurry, you can do it now. It's gonna be 6 minutes.